coders, I'm Cody and welcome to a beginner's guide to testing JavaScript using Mocha and Chai. So basically just going to write a quick little module, a simple number list, which you can add numbers to it, get the sum of the list, multiply all the numbers together, get the results, etc. And then test that the module that we wrote is working as intended. So to start off, I have a folder here called unit testing, in which has a test folder and a source folder. And inside the test folder, we have an index.html, which we're viewing right here. And what this is doing is we have some simple elements set up, and including some scripts so that we can set up Mocha and Chai to use for our testing. So for example, the first thing we include is a Chai CSS file. And that's used for making this over on the right. This is going to be our test runner on the right side. So pretty much we're going to format that and make it look pretty for us. But obviously this is optional. We don't really need this. 7, an ID called Mocha. That's for allowing Mocha to know where to put its rendered HTML, such as here. And then secondly, lines 9 and 10, we include the Mocha framework. So 342 mocha.js. And this is hosted on CDN.js. And then line 10, we include the Chai framework. And then we have on line 13, we need to include the module that we want to test. So in this case, we're including up-a-level source number list.js. Line 16, we tell Mocha to set up using behavior-driven development. And then on line 19, we need to define a global called expect, which is the Chai's way of using assert statements. So Chai is used for checking that a certain number is equal to another number, checking that an object has properties or whatnot. It just has a bunch of different ways that are really elegantly written out to assert certain things. And we'll see that later on. And then finally, after we do that, we can include our test files, which is going to be used for testing over our source file. And then lastly, we say mocha.run, which will just run all of our unit tests. All right, so now that we have our whole test setup ready to go, let's go ahead and go into number list here and define a global way to create a number list. So in here, I'll go ahead and say if window.numberList is not defined, we're going to go ahead and define it. So we say window.numberList is equal to, we'll just give that, for now, we'll just do a function. So numberList is a function, which we can call. And then we're going to be calling this with the new keyword. So it's kind of like a class. So the first thing we need to do is declare some type of internal structure. So numberList, this module is just going to basically keep an array of numbers and then give us some helper methods to compute stuff over that list. So like add everything up in the list or multiply everything together, etc. So to start off, let's go ahead and say const numbers is equal to an empty array, because that's going to be our private internal variable to our class. And then we could say this dot add, or we'll say sum all is equal to a function which is going to return some type of sum. So I'll go ahead and say let sum equal to 0, loop through our number list. All right, so this is a method which runs through our number list and just sums up everything and then returns it. Right, super basic, simple for loop. We can have another method and we can call it multiply all. And we can say this is the product. Instead of plus equals, we can say times equals. We can have a method called clear, which is going to just remove everything from the list. So we can say numbers.splice 0 and then numbers.length. So that's the JavaScript way of clearing a list. And then finally we can say push, which we can just go ahead and add a number to the list. So we say numbers.push number. I forgot to declare number up here, so go ahead and declare number. So now in this case, we have a module called numberList, which basically allows us to run a couple of methods. And at this point, we can actually start testing it. So how would you do that manually, right? So you probably declare a new number list, start adding some numbers to it in your console, and check to make sure that certain things print out. So now, how do we write these so-called automated tests to unit test our number list module. So now if I were to go into our number list.test file, the first thing, this is kind of the Mocha paradigm. What you need to do is start writing some describe blocks. So describe is like the highest level that you're testing. So we'll say describe number list. And when that's going to take a callback. So then once you have a describe block, you can then write either a unit test using an it statement, or you can again write another describe block. So we'll say after initialization. So after initialization, you want to check a certain number of things. So we can say it should sum to 0. And then we'll go ahead and write the callback there. So now we have two describe blocks. These are kind of ways for the developer to chunk related tests together in the same block. And then the it statements are our actual tests, which test our methods and our module itself. So before I get into that, there's one thing I need to do, which is we need to first declare a list, which we're going to be testing. So I'll say list under test equals null. And then inside a describe, we can write something called a before or before each. And in this case, we'll say before each test that we run, what we want to do is define a new number list. So therefore, every test we have a brand new number list that doesn't have all the old numbers that we added to it. So after initialization, what do we need to test? We need to test that list under test.sumAll. So the describe blocks, the before each, there's also before, there's after each, which is after each it statement we do something. And there's after, which is after each describe block. Inside this block, we do something. So again, before each, after each. Those are the four main setup and tear down functions that you have in Mocha. And then chai is where we start using these expect statements. So chai allows us to say in kind of like plain English, expect number list or list under test sum all should equal 0. So now you kind of know the difference between what Mocha is, what test is, or what chai is, and how you can kind of use them together to write your tests. Instead of using should, I need to say to equal. So I made a little mistake previously. That's why I cut the film. So instead of using should, I should use to the keyword. So expect list under test sum all to equal 0. So plain English, we can read as a developer what exactly is being tested and what we need to assert it equals to. And notice that when the test passes, we get a little check mark over here, and in this Mocha HTML file, it prints out the describe block. So number list after initialization should sum to 0. We can say, let's see, product should produce a product equal to null. I guess we could say, I don't know, depends on how we want to write our test, but we can say null. So in this case, we should say multiply all to not, or to be undefined. So if you run this, this is going to fail because you're going to be returning 1 instead of undefined. So this kind of shows how you can do test-driven development. You write your test, you make it fail, and then you go back to your actual implementation. And then what you can do is say if numbers.length is equal to 0, return null. So now when the code runs, to be null instead of undefined. Okay, so now it's passing. So that's kind of test-driven development. You write the test, make sure it fails, and then go back to the code or the module and fix it and write it in such a way that the test will not pass. So we have a couple of tests for initialization, and then we could say, let's make another describe block called adding new numbers. In this case, we should say should sum to 10 after adding 4 and 6. So in this case, we can say list under test dot push 10. I'm sorry, we can push 4, we can push 6, and then we can grab the same method. And this should sum to 10, which it does, so pretty cool. And then we can write another test saying should produce a product of 20 after adding 10 and 2. So say 10 and 2 and say multiply all. Save that. And then when this runs, it should also pass. Okay, so now we have more confidence that the module we wrote is working. And then every time we make changes to the module, it's going to refresh and show us that, hey, it's actually passing the test that we expected to pass. And then the last couple of, I guess I'll do one more describe block, and I'll say, deleting or clearing the list. So it should sum to 0 after adding 2 and then clearing it. And then clearing the list. So I'll say push 2 list under test dot clear, and then sum all again should equal 0 because we just deleted everything. Get rid of that one. Save this, and it should test or should pass. Cool, it does. And then lastly, let's do the same thing for product. So it should produce a product of null after adding 2 and then clearing the list. So grab multiply all should be null. Okay, so we have our number list module completely tested, or I don't know, completely tested, but tested pretty thoroughly. We covered how to do these before, these after, before each and after each. We don't really do any afters, but if I wanted to say after each, do something special, like, I don't know, list under test, I could do clear. Pretty much every time after the is statement runs, it's just going to run after each. But in this case, we don't really need this. And then a couple things I'll show is using skip and only. So let's say we're kind of testing a file that has maybe 100 tests in it, but we really just want to focus on fixing or writing a single test. Well, we can do .only after these describe blocks or it statements, so that it will only run this test. So if I were to save this file, it only runs that one test. And then additionally, if we don't want to even mess with that test, we can put skip on it. So it's going to run everything except for that test. And you can see here in blue, it's skipped out. And we can do the same thing for entire describe blocks. So if we do describe skip there and skip here, we can see on the right that it's skipping both of those describe blocks and only running our middle one. And then the same thing for only. If I only want to run the adding new numbers tests, I can add only, and that's what it does. All right, so that pretty much wraps up how to use Mocha and Chai to test a very simple JavaScript module. At this point, I'd suggest looking into like Karma, which is a test runner for testing larger projects inside an actual web browser. And then you can use, start learning about E2E testing like Protractor, which actually will load up your UI or whatever and click buttons for you and do the real testing as if you were pressing around. Look into Grunt or Webpack and how those integrate with Karma in Mocha.js. But those can be for a much later tutorial, and it's kind of a more advanced subject. But for the most part, this tutorial is just how to use Mocha, how to use Chai, how do you write basic tests, and what's the purpose of testing. Cool. So if you like this video, feel free to subscribe and like, and then also feel free to leave me any feedback if you have any questions in the comment section below. All right. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.